Welcome to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to all things New York Liberty. I'm Felicia, and I'm joined by my co-host Francois. We're recapping the Commissioner's Cup game where the Liberty faced off against the Minnesota Lynx. The Liberty were hoping to become the first team to win back-to-back, but the Lynx had other plans, and New York fell to Minnesota with a score of 89-94. Francois, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. And unfortunately, it was definitely not the results that we expected. But as we said before, Minnesota is a tough team. It's a well-oiled machine. And Cheryl Reeve was saying after the game, okay, now we have your attention now. Do we have your respect? Because now we beat your super teams. We were not surprised by how good they were. But, seeing it in person and beating us for the second time, they lived up to the moment and got the cup and the dollar bills, should I say. But if we look at the game, there were things that Minnesota did really well to cause troubles to the Liberty and things that the Liberty could have prevented. We'll get that into details later on that. But yeah, when I mentioned a well-oiled machine, what impressed me the most with the Minnesota Lynx is their defense.
Yeah.
The level of intensity that they put in every play and the way they rotate. When the Liberty had some very nice ball movement in the first half, and the intensity that they put to always try to make sure that someone is covered, that was quite something to watch. But the Liberty, though, started the game very well and did things that could have gotten the game. I mean, Minnesota is the best defensive team in the league, and they conceded 50 points in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the teams playing in the first half, they looked evenly matched. I thought this game was going to be close. I thought it would come down to the wire. I really thought whoever wins, they're only going to win by a few points. I didn't think this would be a blowout in any way. I just thought this is going to be tight, and the Liberty can't make mistakes with this team. Minnesota, when you see their defense and how quick they are, they're much quicker than the Liberty at times, and you can see that the way they're quick to double JJ and get back to their assignment, double or triple team sometimes Stewie. It made the Liberty's life tough. Yes, the Liberty got some good shots off in the first half. Kayla Thornton was coming through with them threes, and everybody was really happy for her. Just seeing her continue that stretch, because we saw her a few games ago, just 3 after 3, just going for it. And in this game, she did the same. But yeah, I do think for the Liberty, their mistake was, to me, being sped up by Minnesota because Minnesota played so quick, but also just handling the ball. I would have to say in this game, the turnovers is what really lost them this game. Because when you look at the stats of both teams, they're fairly even to start. But when you think about rebounding, a lot of times we say whoever has the most rebounds they tend to win the game. They tend to have a better advantage. And here, rebounding, Minnesota 25 rebounds, the Liberty 43 rebounds.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at you look at the stats, you almost wonder how on earth did the Liberty lose that game because their field goal percentage was fairly decent, 44.9, 41.4 from the 3-point line. They dominated the rebounds, dominated the offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
So you would think that with those kind of numbers, the Liberty should win. But as you said, the turnovers, and it was very telling at the post game conference when Stewie looked at the stat sheet, and her eyes widened like when she probably saw the number of turnovers for the Liberty, because when you have 20 or 21 turnovers in a game, you cannot expect to win a game. And she said it, vividly. We cannot win a game with that many turnovers. And yes, Minnesota defended really well, put a lot of pressure. But, I rewatched the game today, and the number of turnovers that, was just the Liberty's own fault. Whether it was Sam, KT. We'll talk about how, they would try to get JJ involved in the second half and didn't succeed. But like a lot of mistakes that at this level, you cannot expect to win a final cup by doing those kind of mistakes. And, 27 points off of turnovers, that is,
I mean, when you look at the final score, they lost by 5, but obviously they were trying to make a comeback, towards the end of the game. But 27 points off of 20 rebounds.
20 turnovers.
20 turnovers. That is not going to win any game on any planet for any team. It doesn't matter how well you've done in other areas. 20 turnovers, like that, I think that's the most I've seen for the Liberty, I feel like. I don't know where I've seen
probably
20 turnovers in the game.
At the start of the season.
They're usually like 12 or 14, and I'm always like, if you could just keep that in single digits, you were good. But even sometimes with 12 or 14 turnovers, they've managed to still win the game. But 20, you're putting yourself in a hole. And a lot of, Minnesota's quick. They got to the ball, but I will say that for the Liberty, too many times the communication just wasn't there sometimes between the players. Initially, it started off well, but then turnovers just started to happen where a little bit of pressure, someone's dribbling it off their leg, or they just too far ahead, someone pokes the ball, or just on a pass, like they just dropped the ball. Like it just didn't make sense that at this level, you shouldn't be doing this. And the Liberty know, like in order for them to get all the way to a championship, these things have to be corrected. Like you have to be locked in. And again, Minnesota had their own mistakes too, but definitely I would say in the second half, they turned it up a notch and the Liberty didn't. The Liberty definitely struggled heavily in the second half, and Minnesota took off from there.
Yeah, I think what was very frustrating was that at the end of the game, Sandy said that, it's, something that we'll learn moving forward. But I mean, that's the second time you're facing that team.
Yeah.
Second loss. The first time around, they beat you fair and square by 17. And they pretty much used the same tactics.
Yeah.
Like, you should have, I'm sure that they've done a scouting report and they knew what to expect from the Minnesota Lynx. And it's almost like it wasn't enough. Yeah. And just like in the first game, what Minnesota had done very well was to target JJ, because they knew Jonquel Jones, if she gets the ball on the inside, I don't think even Alana Smith, who's a great defender, I don't think one-on-one at the post she would be able to sustain and stop Jonquel Jones. They had managed to limit her to 4 or 5 points in the first game. And it was very telling in this game that they try to do the same. So, Alana Smith or Nafisa Collier would try to make it very hard for Jonquel Jones to get the ball on the inside. They were really trying their best to get over her and, putting their long arms so that, they would make it very difficult for JJ to get the ball. But then sometimes when she would get the ball, and it was the same for Stewie as well, they would double or triple teaming them right away, which made it really hard for them to, initiate any offense, creating some turnovers. Now, what the Liberty was able to do well in the first half as a result of that was to move the ball, and Kayla Thornton, who's on the roll once again with the three-pointers. I mean, efficiency from the arc is incredible right now. And once again, she was the player that really helped us in the first half. I think she had 3 or 4 three-pointers in the first half, got the crowd going. Even, having a little, swag, looking at Jonathan Cobbs, the New York Liberty's general manager. Everything was going for her, because obviously if you double, triple team in JJ or Stewie, that's going to leave at least one player open. And if you manage to get the ball out and have some nice ball movement, KT in the corner was the player that made them pay. But unfortunately, that didn't last the whole game, because Minnesota made some adjustments. And I was telling you when we rewatched the game, what was very telling was the third quarter. The difference in intensity on defense between Minnesota and the New York Liberty. So the New York Liberty, and that was the same in the first game that they played against Minnesota, they really struggle with the pick and roll defense. And what Minnesota does very well is that you have the person that sets the screen, most of the time Alana Smith or Nafisa Collier, and instead of setting the screen, they directly cut to the basket. And the Liberty would get caught up in those action plays almost every single time. And then the second thing that was very damning in the second half was the rotation. There were a couple of times where Zandalasini was kind of like in the middle, sort of being the helper in case someone needs help on defense. But, by doing that, she would leave completely open, wide open, her defensive assignments and would not pay attention when Minnesota was quick to move the ball. And then you will end up with one person, shooting threes on their own. And when Benaja realized that, she has to mark a person, she comes too late. And then there were a couple of times that, Minnesota made them pay for it. At times where the Liberty had a couple of runs, and then in less time than you know, they were back in this game and then took the lead. Well, what did you make of those lapses on defense and how they struggle against the pick and roll?
I mean, the problem for the Liberty, the game, yes, basketball is a game of runs, and you can have lapses. There were lapses on both sides of the court, but when Minnesota had a lapse of anything, whether on defense, the Liberty just couldn't make them pay enough. The way if Liberty had lapses, Minnesota could get the ball and would make them pay, usually by a 3-point shot. And I think the Liberty, they just didn't seem like the aggressors. Yeah. It was all Minnesota, and the Liberty didn't really become as aggressive as they needed to be until it was too late. Yeah. Late in the fourth, they're really starting to push. Or you saw late in the fourth, Stewie kind of took some stuff into her hands, and scored 9 points. Yeah. And so it's hard when you watch the Liberty and you know how great this team is, that when it's almost like they start to, I don't know if it's lazy or they just start to have this miscommunication. They're slow with passing. They're not as crisp. It's just not popping the way you saw with Minnesota. That ball was popping. They were moving. And it was similar to just kind of how the Liberty last year
that's what I was going to say.
Played against the Aces at times. You saw the way the Aces were moving the ball, and that's, Becky Hammond's thing, to make sure that ball pops, because that will throw off your defenders. They can't keep up, especially with the Liberty switching all the time. They're not going to be able to keep up. And usually what ends up happening, someone is lost on defense. Yeah. And that's what happened every time. Somebody was not switching or not quick enough to get, to their new assignment, and then Minnesota would make them pay. Now, the Liberty, they were able to manage, what was the highest lead? I think it was like 10 points.
10 points, yeah.
So they were able to kind of come back, but you could see in those moments that even if the Liberty took the lead, Minnesota would come right back. And it was just like the Liberty just didn't know what to do to hold the lead. And at that point, you're just like, what are we doing here? Like, this is not the Liberty team we've seen building throughout the year, but Minnesota is a tough team. Me personally, I could see this being the final. I could totally see these two teams in the finals, and it's going to be a tough one because...
Well, for me, the ideal scenario would be for the Liberty to be top of the league, and then Minnesota or Vegas being second and third, so that they could face up in the semifinal, and we don't have to deal with any one of those two teams before the final. But it's definitely a tough matchup. But I think you're totally right when you sort of make a comparison with the finals against the Aces last year, because it was very reminiscent of those 3 losses, particularly I would say the last one at home in New York in Game 4 of the WNBA Finals, where they have those lapses or those moments for like 5 or 6 minutes where mentally they're just off. Like, it's almost like they forget to play their game. They forget to kind of stay composed and start kind of panicking and do things that is very unusual for them. Because we were talking before recording the podcast about the shot selection from Sabrina Ionescu, who in the first half was very composed. She was the leader of the team, making good shots. And then in the second half, we know that she can shoot from afar, way beyond the arc. But like there were a couple of times where she rushed shots, taking shots, from way too far and way too quickly, turning the ball over very unexpectedly. And there's gonna have to be something, mentally for the Liberty to work on, and something that unfortunately for the critics of the Liberty or the haters is gonna comfort them in their opinion of this team, because nobody's doubting the talent, but a lot of people seem to question their mental strength when it matters the most. And unfortunately, in that final, is gonna prove that is right. And so I don't know if it's the players or if it's Sandy's role to do that. You have a 10-point lead. Cheryl Reeves took a timeout. I think it was the second quarter. 10-point lead. They take a timeout. They come back from the timeout. They had 8 or 9 points straight. Like, how is that even possible? Like, obviously that's the point of timeouts, to kind of take a break and kill the momentum. But you cannot, when everything was going your way, all of a sudden you're completely derailing from the plan.
Yeah, I mean, they got away from their plan. And I think what you're saying about whether it's Sandy or the players, the mental fortitude, just whatever scheme they do, that the Liberty put together for this game, even if they went away from it, it's still up to the coach.
Yeah.
To reset the team and get them back on track. It's still up to Sandy. And it's a bit of both, Sandy and the players. I think, yes, this game ultimately doesn't count in the standings, thankfully. But
it still stings, though. It's a final.
It's a final. But it also is telling for the Liberty in the sense that, they're on this winning streak. They haven't lost too many games, but one of them was to Minnesota initially. And they got whooped by Minnesota in that first game with the first meeting. And this game, I thought, okay, they're stronger, they're better. They could take Minnesota, or it's going to be real evenly matched, and it's going to come down to the last couple of shots. But Minnesota, to me, still has an edge on the Liberty. And that their communication and the way they are on defense, they just look so much more connected on defense than the Liberty. They're faster. They just can get to their assignments. And honestly, JJ having 3 points will never win you a game.
I was going to tell you about this.
To me, as always, we've been saying it since last season. You have to get the ball to JJ. You have to. And there has to be a better way. The guards were having a horrible time. Minnesota's defense, you have to give it to them. They made it hard for Benijah, Sabrina, Sloot. They made it hard. But for Stewie, it was a little bit easier. I think had they switched that up, there were a few times where Stewie brought the ball up, which you had to pull some of the longer defenders out, which actually gave JJ a little bit of room. But it was almost, by the time they even realized to do that more, they just didn't do it enough. And it was almost too late, because at that point, they were defending so well on JJ. I think by the time they were pushing in the second half, trying to get it to her, you got more turnovers happening.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned, JJ and the lack of points from her, because I almost feel like it's unprofessional for, one of your best players to only end up with 3 points. She didn't score any baskets. Her points came from the free throw line. And I know that the Minnesota Lynx had a great defense and a great plan against her, but you got to be more intentional about how you try to get her involved. And yes, you could argue they try in the second half, but the way they executed was horrible. I mean, to start the game, the third quarter, they try to pass to JJ, but they were so far away from JJ. Like, you don't try to pass the ball from like the center of the arc of the 3-point line. You want to be at least on the side and making sure that she's set in the position and has the advantage towards a defender. Sometimes they were just throwing the ball to her when she wasn't even set, and you could see that Alana Smith was like right next to her, and it wasn't going to be possible, but they still pass her the ball anyway.
Yeah.
Or there was one pass that went in the stands. I was like, what is this? Like, how do you like... I know you have to get JJ involved, but if this is how you do it, like, you're making it easy on the defense. So there was that, but you also have to talk about, the aggressions of JJ. Like, she was not aggressive at all. Like, yes, the defense did a good job, but JJ, you gotta fight. Like, you cannot let yourself get off the game so easily and just being like almost like passive. Now, she was still doing a great job on defense. She had a couple of blocks. She had a lot of rebounds. She had a couple of good passes and setting the screens, from the 3-point line, as they always do. But, I felt like there were times where it's almost like she gave up. Like, she threw the white flag and I was like, okay, it's not going to be my night. And it's like, no, like, the game is not over. And what was, very, sad is that after the game, she mentioned that she did notice that there was one play that they could have used more. And that was, like, sort of available and that would have worked because she could tell that Minnesota would have not been prepared, was the relationship between the top of the key and the low key. And I think they only did it once between Jonquel and Stewie playing, for each other in the paint.
And I don't understand how they didn't do that more and how they didn't figure that out. Like, they were having a tough time trying to get anything to JJ from the jump. So I was like, I don't understand why you didn't make any sort of adjustment in that moment. Like, you saw that play and you're just like, use Stewie. Like, they both have the length. I mean, yes, Minnesota has length too, but when you have Stewie coming up, it's gonna pull the taller defenders towards Stewie because they're already trying to double team or triple team Stewie and JJ half the time. Yeah. So it's just, to me, it was like everything is such an afterthought for the Liberty sometimes. I feel like JJ is your player, and without her, you're not winning. Yeah, you're not winning a championship.
Not with 3 points in the game, that's for sure.
You're not winning a championship without JJ. If JJ even scored 10 points, this is a different game and the Liberty could have won this. She didn't even get that. So it's just like, man, like, you have to figure out a way that if it's not working, you need to quickly rectify that because JJ needs to be one of your main scorers. Like, you gotta work that out. I just feel like sometimes JJ is an afterthought. They're like, oh, in the second half, we should try to go to JJ more. You should have thought of that from the first quarter. Like, this is something that when you see it happening, you saw them getting double, triple teamed first, second. You saw it all the first half. Why aren't adjustments being made in that moment so that by the time you get to the second half, maybe there are some things that you could have worked on to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Instead, you got Sabrina struggling, Benaja struggling, they were all trying to get her the ball. But it's hard when Alana Smith and others are just collapsing on her and preventing the ball from getting inside. And then they still try with defenders in front of JJ. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. You're going to have a turnover. And it just didn't look right until Stewie got the ball. And I'm like, she has the length. Like, you could pass it high and hope that, JJ's probably going to get to the ball. JJ is stronger. Once JJ gets to her spot, not many people can take her. But it didn't happen. Yeah,
and when you look back at the stats, I think what was, the Liberty's loss is that third quarter. That was very, horrible. I mean, there's no other word. I think they were 2 for 13 in that third quarter. I counted at least 5 or 6 turnovers in that quarter. And that's where, the Lynx created the difference. But then, like you said, in the fourth quarter, Stewie gave us a little bit of hope. She scored those 9 points in a very short amount of time. There was about 5 minutes left. The Liberty were only down by 1. Stewie had scored a free.
Yeah.
The crowd went bananas, and we were really hopeful. And then, after the timeout, turnovers.
Always after a timeout.
Yeah, after a timeout, turnovers, and just like, the Lynx were in control, and we were just like playing catch up for the last few minutes. Now, I have a question for you, because when I was reading, like, online on social media, like the different reactions from Liberty fans, they were not kind with Sandy Brondello. And, we were talking on the way back, on the long way back from the UBS Arena, what could have, been done a little bit better, or, things that worked that we wish we would have seen more. But, I feel like she didn't trust her bench. Looking back, Kennedy Burke had some good minutes. Phoebish, even though she had, some foul troubles, offered some good minutes on defense. Vandersloot, wow, I have to say something about Courtney Vandersloot. It was really great to see her back on the court, but also incredible considering that she lost her mom probably just a week ago, and she was already back on the court. And she gave us, a good few minutes coming from the bench, being aggressive, being a good passer, as she always is a great passer, but you almost like forget how good of a passer she is, especially when you haven't seen her for a little while. I felt like she could have relied a little bit more on the bench, and she didn't. And I feel like, the fans, I don't know. Some fans were saying that, if she doesn't get it right this year, that, her job could be in jeopardy. I mean, yes, we're still a long way before the end of the season, but it's almost like nobody's questioning, how good of a coach Sandy is, but it's almost like in those critical moments, is she the right person to like ignite the Liberty when things get tough, or when you see that maybe some of your stars like, need a break, or you see players that were playing well from the bench, maybe you give them a bit more minutes. And I felt like, there was something missing, and I feel like something could have been done to get a better outcome.
I do think in this game she should have tried the bench a little bit more. In particular, Burke and Phoebish. Yes, Phoebish may have gotten into foul trouble, but let her. Like I feel like
she was defending well in the physical.
Yeah, she was defending well. If she fouls out, or if she gets 4 fouls, whatever, like she's a bench player, then you bring back your starter. I think she just doesn't trust her bench enough. And you're gonna have to, because you're gonna need them. You can't ride your starters so much that they tire out if they make it to the finals. And so you're going to have to trust your bench at times. And honestly, I'm not saying Burke has been great in every single game, but she actually did better in this game. And honestly, these players need minutes in order to get better in the game. They can't sit the bench. You play them for 2 minutes and then expect them to drop 10 points or be this defensive powerhouse. They're sitting the bench so much. Like, to me, that's how people get better. Think about it. Like, I'm going to go back to last year. When did Dee Richards?
It was the 2021 season.
Right. You don't play her a whole lot.
And the 2022 season. She played more in 2021. 2022 was the season with Sandy's first season.
She barely played.
Yeah.
She's not with the team. She goes to Australia. And what does she do? Now she's with the Mystics. But we've seen her a few times just play with the Mystics at times. But we've seen her, they need reps. She's gotten better.
Yeah. Because
she's playing the game. Like, you can't expect some of these players, especially Phoebish and Burke, they're used to starting in Europe on their team. So they're used to playing long minutes. Like, you can't expect them. It's tough. I know that, they can only provide you a few minutes, but you really got to trust your bench and use them a bit more. Phoebish, she was starting, when Benaja was out, and, she did well. And yes, there's a learning curve for her, because I think in the WNBA, unfortunately, she is meeting the refs of the WNBA, And she's getting into foul trouble on some questionable things that I'm sure in Europe probably wouldn't be a foul. And so, for her, that's just a learning curve. But she was defending pretty well on Afisa Collier. You have to give her that. And Burke got, I think, 5 points. Yeah. She could have been a help offensively. They also can provide an element of surprise. Because when you think about it, the scouting reports on your starters, you know how they play. Phoebus, you don't quite know. Burke, you're not you don't see them as much. So they could provide that. Flip side to Minnesota. How many people? She only played 8 players for the whole game. But everyone that came in can launch a 3.
And as
every single one.
As Cheryl Reeves was mentioning her Italian player, I would not exactly say the word that she used, but Zandalasini. My goodness, she
was a killer.
What a pick for the Minnesota Lynx. She had 15 points, and every time she was coming on the court, she was killing us with freeze, turnaround jumpers. And she had done the same in the first matchup in Minnesota early in the season. So they have those players, and you have Natisha Eiderman coming from the bench as well, who's, when you have a player of that caliber coming from the bench, that is a luxury. Yeah. And, nobody mentioning Courtney Williams. But, Courtney Williams also was, created a lot of damage for the Liberty's defense. I think she, sort of shifted towards more of a point guard role from last season with the Chicago Sky. She had that role, and she's blossoming in that role. And I feel like, she also was problematic because the way she controls the game, the way she uses the pick and roll, they say that she's the player with the most contested baskets in the league. So she has the ability coming off the pick and roll, taking speed and have that mid-range shot. And even if you try to contest, she will make it. And then the quality of her passing as well. She has that ability to, kind of pass the ball in between legs or something in a tiny little hole in the defense. So they have so much talent. I forgot to mention Carleton as well, who could have been, to be honest, for me, she was the MVP of that game.
I thought she should have been 6 of 8 from 3, 8 of 10 field goal. I mean,
she had a couple of steals at a moment where the Liberty were coming back, couple of frees to kill the game. So they are stacked. But to go back on, the question I asked you about, trusting the bench more, I mean, that was the 5th game for the Liberty in 8 days. That's a lot. You have to play the bench. And considering that, you have Benija Laney and Courtney Vandersloot back, that hadn't, I would say that Benija had not played for almost a week pretty much a week since that loss against the Phoenix Mercury, which was exactly a week from that Minnesota Lynx game. And then Vandersloot, I feel like hasn't played in almost a month. Yeah. So, those 2 players, they actually did relatively well, especially on offense, but, they're a little rusty. So, yes, they provide minutes, but maybe not necessarily the same amount of minutes that they would play before. And so, therefore, you think that, Kennedy Burke, Phoebus would provide, that the spark that you need, but she didn't, I don't know, I felt like she didn't trust them.
I think in this game, she probably should have stuck with
the same lineup that had worked. Yeah, a lot of people mentioned that as well.
I think she should have stuck with the lineup
with the Phoebus, Foreign, with Stewie, Saab, and JJ.
Benija, and Sloot did come from the bench, and have Benija come from the bench. Just, you need Benija for the long haul. And yeah, she may have felt better, but you could see the lapses and not getting back in time, not being quick enough. They both seemed, they were missing a step. And so that just didn't help, because with Minnesota playing so fast, you just felt like the Liberty was just kind of catching up. And when they would catch up, it was basically the guards, whether it was Sabrina cutting to the basket, having some nice floaters or 3-point shots, and, or Stewie trying to take over in the 4th. But again, the runs, You allow Minnesota to take timeouts, they come back, and no matter who's on the court, someone is going to punish you on the Minnesota Lynx team. And that's hard because when you look at the Minnesota Lynx team, they do remind me, they're different, but they do remind me a little bit of the Aces in the sense that all 5 on the court can punish you.
Yeah.
I can't say that for the Liberty. I can't say that all 5 will punish you because sometimes their shot selection is not the smartest. And sometimes they second guess. I don't know why they do that. I feel like your top 3 players for the Liberty are JJ, Stewie, and Sabrina. They usually have a better shot selection sometimes. Yeah, the ball may not go in all the time. But then with Benijah and KT, sometimes, yes, KT is your 3-point corner shot. That's kind of where she lives. But then Benijah sometimes, like, I don't know if she's just taking on her defensive role just more aggressively this year. And she had points. She did get points. It came, I think, later into the second half. But to me, her shot selection, sometimes she second guesses herself.
Yeah.
And you could see it. She hesitates on the court instead of knowing what she's about to do and going for it. And that's the difference. Like, sometimes you see Minnesota go, and they're going for it. Like, no one is stopping them. Whereas with the Liberty, you can almost see them second guess on the court. And it's like, you're done. Because once their defense gets you, you just made it even more difficult for yourself. And hopefully you get a shot off, and that's great. But when the Liberty go, you see when the decision making is quick and crisp, the Liberty are unstoppable. The problem from them is that they don't keep that intensity all 4 quarters. And it's hard to keep that kind of intensity all 4 quarters, but that's what they have to do.
No.
In order to get there and in order to get to the top. Like, that's what you're going to have to do because these other teams, they're trying to do that. Yes, there's lulls in the game. Yes, there's runs in the game. There were too many runs in the sense that when the Liberty got the lead, Minnesota would come right back and hit them right back. They couldn't hold defensively. And it was just like, it was frustrating to watch, honestly.
Yeah, so in the end, we will not get the back-to-back for the Commissioner's Cup. It's okay. I mean, we wish those ladies would get that extra money. They still get money for being the finalists, not as much as Minnesota. But it is what it is. And, if at the end of the season they end up winning the title, nobody would care that they lost the Commissioner's Cup final. So, and I hope also that I don't know if they would look back at the game, probably, and I hope they will. But at the end of the game, there was something that kind of bothered me a little bit. It was Courtney Williams that was kind of sort of bragging at the end. She was kind of like, putting her hand next to her
hair. She always does that.
And then like, showing the money signs. And I was like, it was so unnecessary. Like, it wasn't like the crowd was like really overzealous against you guys.
Yeah.
And they beat the Liberty fair and square. So I felt like it was not really necessary. You won the game, you won the extra money. So she's
always been kind of the one on the court. She has no problem talking trash to anybody on the court or off the court.
That is for sure.
I feel like that's her thing.
But like, I don't know. What I really hope is that the Liberty get to see that and kind of keep it in their mind as a motivational tool. Now, maybe and I hope you don't need that just for motivation. Like, try to beat Minnesota is good enough as a motivation. But just, looking back at what she did, because I know, like, last year, they always picked up on those things when other teams beat them or said something about them online, that they would keep that in mind for the next time they play against them. So, actually, we won't have to wait that long to face them again, because we'll face them on July 2nd as part of the regular season. And what is very ironic was that Minnesota, say, oh, now you're going to talk about us. And then as we were recording this podcast, they lost this morning against the Dallas Wings. So,
That's
that is crazy. But, Dallas, they got Natasha Howard back. They got Odyssey Sims on the hardship contract. She was with the Wings last year. So, maybe they'll get better. But, yeah, on the standings, it's not looking good for Minnesota to lose a game like this. But, I felt a little joy inside of me when I saw the result, because I was like, well, you were bragging and, talking trash about us. Now you lost right after.
They notice you now.
It is what it is, but yeah.
I will say this, thinking about Sandy Brondello for a second.
Yeah.
The system she has put in play, I do think if the Liberty are trying to win a championship, you're going to have to keep her. In a sense, meaning if you bring in a new coach, say after this season, for one, I don't know who you would bring in. Two, bringing in a new coach, a new system, new everything.
I mean, it's sometimes like, let's just say if they lose again, whether it's in the semi-final or the final, well, clearly something is not working, right?
Something's not working.
Nobody would question how good of a coach you are or good of a team we are, but clearly it would have meant that you fell at the objective, which is to win a title.
Right.
Clarence Wu Tsai and Joe Tsai didn't spend all that money to just be a finalist, right? Bringing JJ and Stewie and Vandersloot, you're not trying to be the second best team in the league. You're trying to win a title. So, if they fail this year, you're going to have to ask yourself those questions. And as much as we like Sandy as a person, as a coach, and she has a very good system, like the way they play basketball is a very entertaining way of playing. But clearly that would have meant something is missing. Yeah. And in those cases, usually they get rid of the coach, not the players. The coach get the blame. So it's hard right now to kind of figure out, who would be the best person to replace her if that happens. My guess is that you will need someone with a strong personality, someone that would challenge the players. Mm-hmm. I think Sandy, she does want to give responsibility to the players and kind of push them to figure things out by themselves. But I think sometimes you need that. That extra something to really push them. And because we have a lot of players that are, fairly nice, in terms of mentality and people, maybe you need to have someone that get into their face a little bit, I don't know. It's a long way.
That also begs the question of they still have a 12th spot.
Yes.
And who will take that likely, I assume after the Olympic break. And that's also a tough question because I know we've talked about Sherrod and how, she could really bring a spark.
But realistically, you cannot expect a rookie to turn your franchise
around
to the last hurdle, right? That's a tall task. And I think sometimes as fans, we get, super excited and we get attached because I think, New York fans, we're really big on personality and characters. And she showed a lot of character in the small amount of time that she had. Yeah. She proved that she deserved a spot in this league despite being undrafted. And I felt like, she's the kind of player on the court that the New York fans would really like. But then that's the other downside of New York fans is that sometimes we could get overly excited and kind of lose sight of reality. Yeah. You cannot expect Sherrod to carry the team to a silverware. Unless maybe you're the number one draft pick. And even number one draft pick, it takes them time to figure things out.
I think for whoever that 12th player will be, they have to be an experienced player. We know Marine is not coming back this year, at least for this season. So whomever that person is, they have to be an experienced player. As much as I like Sherrod and thought, man, she would provide a good spark. However, she is a rookie and that's a tall order to put on a rookie to kind of shake things up a bit. That can't be her role. She needs to come in, continue to learn, she's going to come off the bench if she was with the team. And the other part of that is whether or not Sandy would really play her. Because Sandy, again, doesn't trust her bench enough. And even in that game, I felt like you need people that are quick, that can run with Minnesota. And yes, Marquisha Davis is a rookie. Hear me out. I'm not expecting her to be some offensive powerhouse. But she can stay with her assignment. Yeah. And she is quick. That's at least, if you wanted somebody to just help on defense, that is something she could do. She may not get you a lot of points. That's not the point here. But in the last couple of games that we have seen her play, and to see how happy the team is just to see her get minutes, I'm like, why don't you put her in? Like, even if it's for 2 minutes in the first half, see what she can do. And you don't even do that. And then by the time you get further into the game, it's too late to put her in.
Well, what is crazy though is that every single time that Marquisha Davis was on the court this season, you don't feel at any moment that she's out of place or that, she's like completely lost with what's going on.
And she's quick. Even if she didn't realize where to be, she got back to herself. Like, she's not,
So my thing is that if she shows you that she can, understand the system and be on points on defense, and against Atlanta she had like her best performance of her career, then why not trying it?
Yeah.
Why not trying her more? Like, maybe not like, I understand the cup final, but why not? I mean, at this point, you have some players that, are struggling or like kind of tired. Try something new. But that reluctance to...
Especially bringing her in with JJ. Because I feel like in the last game against Atlanta, it worked well when JJ was on the court with her. And I think... maybe Phoebus, you got length when you have them.
Yeah.
Like, she can get up the court quick, and she had a block in her game against Atlanta, and she defended fairly well. Yes, Minnesota's a different team from Atlanta. Yes, they're a strong team, but she's not going to learn if you don't put her in. And I'm just saying, put her in early so you can see what happens. I'm not saying put her in the fourth quarter and expect a miracle. Start it in the first quarter. Try to play your bench more in the first half. See if anything is working there. Then you can go ahead and make the adjustments. Because you're not just going to let a lead balloon into 20, 30 points. No, but you can put your bench players in, see how that works, but keep some of your starters so that there is some consistency and just kind of someone keeping pace there so that the game doesn't get out of hand if Minnesota takes a run.
Yeah, well, that would be for Sandy and her staff to figure things out. The nice thing this week, at least, is that they're going to have at least some rest, 4 days of rest until the next game on Sunday against the Atlanta Dream. And then, a couple of days later, a rematch with the Minnesota Lynx. So I think that's going to do some, tremendous good for this team to rest and practice and continue to gel as a team. Now, before we conclude this podcast, I wanted to quickly, talk about the UBS Arena, because let's not forget that we're at home, but not fully at home. And I like the fact that Jonquel Jones, Stewie, we're quite vocal about it. We made the best out of this situation. We were about a little over 7,000 fans for this game. And to be honest, we were quite loud. Like, we were kind of spread out throughout the stadium. The 200 sections were closed, and, you had a couple of areas with empty seats. But it was loud out there. I think, the Liberty organization did a tremendous job trying to accommodate people to get to the arena, informing people how to get to the arena, and to try to recreate as closely as possible the atmosphere of the Barclays. But, someone was saying 7,000 people is great. But when you look at the average, if it was last year, that would have been a good number for the Liberty. Mm. But this year, the average attendance has been like, I think around 12 or 13,000 for the Liberty. Yeah. So 7,000 is not the same as 12 or 13,000. And if it was at the Barclays, I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have had a 17 to 18,000 people attendance. So, that was definitely, something that we wish could have been done differently. But we really made the most out of it. And, what did you make of the atmosphere, to briefly conclude this podcast?
I think it was, obviously, the Liberty did what they could do with short notice.
Yeah, because they only had 1 week basically to sell tickets.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And I think the WNBA needs to do better when thinking about these games. And you knew the schedule, you knew the NBA draft was going to be this time, same place as always been. Mm. You could have done better in setting that up. But for the fans coming out and doing their best, to have 7,000 fans when I think, you get about half, thereabouts, of what we would normally have at the Barclays.
I felt like that would have, I definitely feel like we really pushed them and helped them. But if you have like double the amount, they would have really felt it, and probably
really felt it.
Maybe at times where they were not, putting the efforts that you expected from them, that would have given them that extra push, like we always do at the Barclays when they're down.
But again, the fans at UBS, we were loud.
Yeah.
I gotta say that for everyone that was there, they did their best, and it got really loud at different points. Again, the Liberty, they gotta play better.
Yeah,
but ultimately, the UBS Arena, I thought they did a great job with just doing it on short notice, being able to go there and just show up for the team.
Yeah.
And that's what you saw. You saw Seafoam Army. You saw, Ellie doing her thing as per usual. And it was still a great environment still.
Yeah, no, it was great because you saw the faithful Liberty fans that have been like season ticket holders for like,
since the beginning.
Since the beginning, pretty much. Yeah. So I think that's the one thing that I would keep from that final is the fans that made the journey to the UBS Arena on a Tuesday at 8:00. That's not easy to commute so far away from your home to see a game, and regardless of that, people show up, we're loud, and it was great to see even on the bus like people's passion for the team. So that was something that at least I would keep in mind. We're gonna put now this game to rest and move on with the rest of the season. So thank you so much, guys, for listening to our podcast and always giving us a lot of support. We really appreciate that, and help us to keep it going. So thank you so much. And as we always say, Felicia,
let's go Liberty!